A clear choice of good versus evil, of right versus wrong.
Okay, quick music disclaimer here. I do not own the rights to this music, which belongs to the rightful owner, who is the intoxicating mind of Dr. Frankenstein. So he made my intro and my outro, and I hope you guys enjoy. Check them out on Spotify and YouTube, and no copyright infringement is intended. Have a good day.
Twisted Tales.
Welcome back to Twisted Tales, folks. Lovely Sunday evening here. Let's talk about some tales. Tonight we're going to talk about the death of Tom Thompson. So Tom Thompson was born August 5th, 1877 in Claremont, Pickering. He died July 8th, 1917 at Canoe Lake. He was one of the most magnificent Canadian painters of the early 20th century. So one of the first painters just to give a cute visual to the Canadian landscape. He painted pictures that became icons of Canadian culture. Example, the West Wind and the Jack Pine, just to name a couple, right? These were painted in the early 1916-1917 era. And although his professional career was cut short, the guy produced about 50 canvases and more than 400 sketches. Now, Thompson was actually a Scottish-Canadian background, and he was the sixth of 10 children born in the town of Claremont in Pickering Township, Ontario. And growing up in Ontario, Tom's father was actually a farmer, and he grew up on a farm. He was just near Leith, just outside of Owen Sound, Ontario. So one of Tom's cousins, he had a big family, right? His name was Dr. William Brodie. He was actually a naturalist who served as a director of the biological department, which is now known as the Royal Ontario Museum. So Tom collected specimens with Dr. Brodie, and he learned how to combine his keen observation of nature, kind of with like a sense of reverence for its mystery, right? So, even earlier days, he was pretty gifted. He learned how to play several musical instruments, like the mandolin. He sang in the church choir until he became, better known for his drawing and paintings. In Tom's younger years, when he attended high school, he was doing so well in there until a chronic illness actually took him out of the school for about a whole year. And then it ended up being a respiratory problem from weak lungs, or medical terminology, inflammatory rheumatism. Eventually he overcame this illness, and he worked shortly after at a machine and foundry shop. But eventually he enrolled in the Canadian Business College in Chatham in about 1902, and he went to the Acme Business College in Seattle, Washington. It was actually a school run by his brother George and one of his cousins. So while attending school in Seattle, he landed his first job with a commercial art company. And he actually worked as an engraver and a calligrapher. And so this started at a firm run by C.C. Mehring, a graduate of the Chatham Business College. He then worked briefly for Mehring and Ladd. The change in ownership soon made that become Mehring and Blake. But Tom was very good at his job, which caught the eye of the Seattle Engraving Company. So we jumped ship over to that company at about $10 extra a week. So, that's a good little pay increase, in those times, right? So some of his duties included making business cards, brochures, posters. So he just kept going and, did his job as best as he could, and it got noticed. Over some time, Thompson actually looked forward to his career in Seattle, wanting to settle down and marry as one of his brothers did back in 1906. He actually met a woman named Alice Eleanor Lambert. She was an American romance novelist writer, and the two actually enjoyed a brief summer romance. She later wrote down, "We knew without words that we loved each other. We had ESP and hardly needed words." So I know he felt the same way towards me, despite the love and everything else between them. When Thompson ended up proposing to her, she ended up laughing at him, therefore rejecting his marriage proposal. So, in a 1934 self-published novel by Lambert called Women Are Like That, she describes a young girl who refuses a young artist's proposal and then later regrets her decision. Now, moving onward after the whole fiasco with the marriage proposal, all that shit, he decided just to go ahead with his development as an up-and-coming painter. So it was kind of still amateur status, so he needed to overcome some obstacles, like his lack of knowledge from the technical side of painting. 1906, he enrolled in night school at the Central Ontario School of Art and Industrial Design. And then it was around 1908 where Grip Limited, a very well-known commercial art firm, at the time of early development, had Thompson join the outfit. Now, a painter named J.E.H. MacDonald, would be short for James Edward Harvey, was also a Canadian artist. He was kind of like the main staple in the development team. So Thompson and MacDonald hit it off and worked really well with each other. When Thompson thrived off of James's knowledge and encouragement, just as James was pretty much just a know-it-all man when it came to paintings and design, all his help started to show change in Thompson, and his genius soon blossomed to his full potential. Now, the sketches of Thompson that he banged off after that, they were mostly shown on weekends by MacDonald and the firm. So there was also a member of the Toronto Art Students League who praised the amazing degree of Thompson's work. 1912, Thompson was actually buried in his work, so he needed a little getaway. So we decided to camp up at Mississauga Forest Reserve, which is actually north of Lake Huron. When Thompson's trip was over, his comrades at Grip Limited advised him that the paintings that he painted while on his trip had a real sense of character of the northern landscape. So fast forward to 1913, Thompson returned to the firm Rouse and Main Limited. He brought his paintings, which he did on his camping trip to Algonquin Park, just quite the advancement from his normal stuff. And this set in stone his start of being one of the best Canadian artists in Canada. Now, his colleagues stated that his work, even though it was very poetic, was still very informative. And developing his first major painting, The Northern Lake, this was made in 1913, is now a permanent collection in the Art Gallery of Ontario. So in autumn 1914, Thompson and his friends, Alexander Young Jackson, Arthur Lismer, and Frederick Barley, they all went camping back to Algonquin Park. And by this trip, Thompson had mastered his transparent. So now he could apply various types of design to his work, in turn evolving his concept of the landscape paintings. So this helped form the Group of Seven, pretty much just a movement that brought awareness to the ever-growing Canadian practice of landscape paintings. And just let me skip over to 1915. So Thompson ended up creating lots of paintings and oil canvases that have come to represent Canada very highly. And he did this all by the young age of 37. And he eventually decided to stay and live in the Algonquin area. So he eased into doing a few other things in the community. Becoming a fishing guide, fire ranger. And during the winter months, he ended up sharing a studio building with Alexander Young, eventually moving into a shack attached to the building to begin working on larger sized canvases. July 8th, 1917, Thompson loaded a canoe with supplies and ventured from Canoe Lake. Eventually, over the next few hours, his canoe will be found overturned. His body was found 8 days later with a bruise on his head, and there was bleeding from his right ear. So a police investigation was never launched on the matter, and his cause of death was ruled as accidental drowning. Some still say to this day that the autopsy report was rushed. Thompson's body was buried at Mowat Cemetery near Canoe Lake the very next day after discovery. It was exhumed 2 days later, and then finally moved to the family plot in Leith, Ontario on July 21st. So September 1917, friends James McCallum, John William Beattie, and James Edward Harvey MacDonald made Thomas a stone cairn. It's kind of like a man-made pile of stones, grave marker kind of thing, right? And they built that with a memorial plaque. And this was looking down over Haywards Point, overlooking Canoe Lake. So there's been many theories on this guy's death. I mean, from writers, the public, school scholars, etc., And a man named David Silcox has argued that Thompson had stood up in his canoe, lost his balance, fallen, hit his forehead, and then he knocked himself unconscious, fell into the water, and drowned. So others have disputed this simply because he was a highly skilled canoeist and a very active outdoorsman. It's been years since this guy died, and nobody can figure out what happened. Accidental, mysterious, who knows, right? There's also other factors that came into play, right? It was a very highly populated logging area. Could maybe a log in the water possibly tipped his canoe over. There's poachers. Maybe they were trying to hide their illegal activities. He stumbled upon them. He got killed. And this is also wartime as well. You got to think about that. And many had fled to avoid the war. So, I mean, they went in isolation. And maybe he stumbled upon them, and they got scared. Something happened. He died, Could have been spies, saboteurs from the other side. It's just quite the tale of mystery. And it's, nobody's really figured out how he died. There's also a theory of suicide that arose, but I mean, that got shot down by his pregnant girlfriend. He said he was a very nice guy, didn't, had everything to live for, right? And others say they believe they found a body near Canoe Lake with a bullet in its head, back in the 50s. And people also think that this could have been Thompson as well. So there's going to be a lot of tales out there just as twisted as this one, Nobody's really going to know the truth about this mysterious death, except for Thompson and God. Wrong place, wrong time kind of thing, right? There's also speculation that on July 18th, 1917, early in the morning, a few people saw Thompson with Shannon Fraser. So Fraser had owned the Mowat Lodge, where Thomas often stayed. So they see them walking towards Joe Lake Dam. And, a park ranger named Mark Robinson wrote in his diary that Thompson left Fraser Dock at 12:30 p.m. to venture to T Lake, or perhaps West Lake. I mean, even after all these years, these are just stories surrounding his mysterious death, so, but now he's at peace, and his paintings still represent Canada in the highest regard. So, his life's work, and especially his death, have become legend. And that's it. That's all I got for you. I hope you guys have a wicked work week. It's almost over. Thank fuck. Have a great day. Thanks for tuning in to Twisted Tales. Bye.
Hi, I'm Ray Cronin. I'm Director of Curatorial Programs and Curator of Canadian Art at the Beaverbrook Art Gallery. And this is the largest exhibition ever mounted in Atlantic Canada of the work of Tom Thompson. Thompson is one of the most important, if not the most important, Canadian artist of the 20th century. He was really our first modernist, the artist that really embraced the changes in art and in culture across the world that happened around the turn of the last century. This sketch, it's an oil sketch is what we call them, and it's a small painting of a waterfall. Thompson would have made this on the site. He would have been in the woods painting this directly. He then came back to Toronto where he had a studio, and he painted this one large painting of that same scene. And of course, one of the great things about this show is that this painting, which normally is at the McMichael Canadian Art Collection in Kleinburg, and this painting, it's the study for it, which is normally at the Vancouver Art Gallery, are side by side. So they're never together except in this show. This is the largest exhibition of his work that's ever been mounted. It's a remarkable show. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, really. These are not the kind of paintings that people like to lend. They like them on the walls in their homes or in their galleries. This is the only venue for this exhibition. The Fredericton is the only place in all of Atlantic Canada that will see this show, and the chances of another one like it happening in the next 30, 40 years are next to zero. So it's a very big deal.
Twisted Tales.